Today, we are continuing in our series in the life of David. I don't think I was named after David. I was named after my dad. He's a much less character guy, if you hear his story, than this David that we come to. But David, last week when we looked at the life of David, David was given the opportunity to take the throne for himself. He had been promised that he would be king of all of Israel. He would be the king, and his predecessor, Saul, who was an awful king, evil guy, trying to kill David, tried to impale him on a spear a couple times. It was a bad shot, apparently. And David was very nimble. David be quick, avoided the spear. But David, he chose the higher road and said, I won't take Saul's life. I'm going to trust God because God is the one who's promised me that I will be king. I will let God sort that out. That's chapter 24 of 1 Samuel. Then on to chapter 26 of 1 Samuel, David has another opportunity to take the life of Saul. He's standing over Saul with a spear. Saul's sleeping with his buddies. He's got guys around him saying, kill him, David, take his life, man. Go ahead, you take the throne for yourself. It's time. God has given him into your hands. Go ahead and shove that spear through him. David's like, I'm not going to do it. It's wrong, and I'm not going to do it. And both times he spares the life of Saul, and he passes the test. It's like he's at a test. Is he going to assert himself as king, or is he going to let God do what he promised and make him king? So in between 24 and 26, we have what? 25, right? 25, the lovely number 25. 1 Samuel 25 is a seemingly little story. It's almost a throwaway story. It's not about kings and a succession to kingdoms and who will rule and who will reign. It's about a personal insult. Seems like a little bit of protection money and some mutton. It doesn't seem like it's a world-changing thing, but here in this story is where David's character will truly be tested, where his mettle will be tested. What kind of man is he? And from this passage, we're going to see what God is up to. There's some big theological principles about what kind of kingdom will David establish. What kind of kingdom is God ushering in David? What kind of line will David start and ultimately lead to the Messiah? What kind of kingdom will that be? But we'll also learn some things that we can apply to our lives personally today. What kind of people will we be? What kind of human beings will we be? How will we treat others? How will we respond when we are offended, when someone does something to us that we don't like? Will we be the kind of people who go off on them, or will we be the kind of people who absorb a wrong and turn it into something good, an opportunity for God to bless and not curse? So let me start with reading. This is a long passage. We're going to read the whole thing, but not all at one go. So I'm going to read a bit of the passage, make some comments on it, just read through it slowly, chew on it, and we'll work through this passage together, okay? So it starts off with a certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel. He was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep. That was a measurement. That's like looking at your bank account. His bank account was 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. So he was very wealthy, and he was shearing those sheep. They were shearing them at Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. My wife, Kay, and I, our first child is named Abigail after this dear lady. And she was intelligent and beautiful. But her husband was surly and mean in his dealings, and he was a Calebite. So we have three characters introduced to us. We got David, who we're already talking about, but we have Nabal, whose name we'll find out later means fool. I don't know if this is his real name. His mom and dad really hated him. No wonder he's surly and mean, or just his nickname because he was a bit of an idiot. And I think it was the latter that was his nickname, what people called him behind his back. But Nabal, and then Abigail, who's beautiful and intelligent, and her name means source of joy. So here we have these characters. So while David was out in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, go up to Nabal at Carmel. And Kathy, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to keep up with me as I go through this. And greet him in my name. So David sends him in his name. Tell him David sent you. I remember as a kid, my mom used to send me places sometimes. She was broke. She'd say, go down to the store, tell them you're Carol Hyatt's kid, and grab this or that. And I'm like, Mom, it's fine. I'll pay them later. They know you're coming. So send them in my name. So he sends these guys in David's name. Say to him, long life to you, good health to you and to your household, and good health to all that is yours. What a lovely statement, right? What a lovely sentiment. He goes to Nabal. He says, hey, long life to you, good health to you and to your whole household, good health to all that is yours. Sounds so chipper and cheery. Now, I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were here with us in Carmel, we didn't mistreat them. The whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs went missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable toward my men, since we have come at this festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find. So when David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Mind you, it's in David's name. We're not just 10 random rogues who are showing up, 10 young guys. We are David's men. David, who is going to be king. David, who has promised the throne. David, who has protected you. Send him. So, and then they waited. So David, we'll find out later, has about 600 elite troops, military troops that are that have protected Nabal's sheep. They have formed, it says later, like a wall around him. Not only didn't they take from him, but they protected him. There were raiding bands all over the place. Philistine raiding bands would come in and steal sheep and kill people off. These men, they acted like a wall around them, protecting them, saving them from, they didn't lose a single sheep, they say, while they were out there. So, and David says, whatever you can spare. You know, we know when it's sheep shearing time, it's also sheep eating time. And you have plenty right now. Could you share with us? We worked for you. I scratched your back now. Scratch mine, right? So what happens here? So they're waiting for some of the proceeds from the harvest. And how does Nabal respond? We've already been introduced and said he's a surly and mean kind of fellow. So how does he respond? Well, Nabal answers David's servants and says, who the heck is David? David who? I don't know. Who is David? Who's this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread, my water, my meat that I have slaughtered from my shears and give it to men coming from who knows where? Oh, so this doesn't appear to be one of those happily ever after stories, right? It's like, sure, David, you were good to me, let me be good to you. Nabal answers in a surly and mean fashion, right? Just how you would expect a surly and mean guy. And a selfish kind of Scrooge McDuck. Mine, mine, mine. I'm sitting on this heap of wealth and I'm keeping it all and not giving you a thing. And not only does he just say, I'm not going to give you anything, doesn't even do it nicely, right? He insults David. Who is David? You know, it's like a union, you know, oh, okay, now the servants are rising up against their master. David's rising up against the master. I can't have that. We can't have those kind of uppity things going on. No way I'm giving you anything. You go back and tell David, I said so. He's not getting anything from me. So this suddenly begins to take on a dark tone, doesn't it? What's going to happen next? Well, David's men don't say a thing. They just listened. They turned. It says David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word to David. And I'm sure they did it with some feeling, with emotion. And then he said, oh, man. And then he said, and you should have seen the way he looked at us, David. Oh, man. And he said, and he was talking about your dad even. Oh, man. So this is not good stuff. So David said to his men, each of you strap on your sword. Strap on your sword. So they did, and David strapped on his as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. So David has some seriously bad intentions towards Nabal at this point. He's been deeply, deeply personally offended, and he has taken matters into his own hand. So 400 men, all geared up and ready to go to battle. 200 he leaves behind with the stuff, and he's going up with 400 angry, well-armed, hungry men who had spent nights in the fields watching over Nabal's sheep, had hung out with his shepherds, and he's going up to basically find what he considered justice for himself. And they had acted as protection around these guys, figured they were entitled to some things that they didn't get. And so this has become a problem. But we come to this beautiful turn in the story. We've been introduced to this lady, Abigail. Earlier in the story, we met Abigail. Fortunately, one of the servants is smart enough. In verse 14, one of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings. But he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing went missing. Night and day they were a wall around us, as the whole time we were herding our sheep near them. So this was a question that Nabal should have asked the servants, hey, did they really do what he said they did? And indeed they did. Now think it over, Abigail. Think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our heads, hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can even talk to him. So think it over, Abigail. What would you do? So Abigail acts quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, you go on ahead, and I will follow you. But she did not tell her husband, Nabal, anything. So Abigail recognizes we're in deep trouble. There are 600 angry, hungry men who my husband, my idiotic husband, has just insulted deeply. He has said bad things about him. He's rejected any claim to anything he has. He didn't just send them away empty-handed. He insulted them to their face and then sent them away, and you'll find out later, Nabal goes on to party. Nabal goes on to throw a big bash and eat up. And Abigail recognizes this is problematic. Okay, Nabal does not. She's smart enough not to tell him, because it seems like he's that much of a fool that he may well have stopped her from doing anything. But she sets to action. She sends out some things to try to appease David and his men, try to smooth things over, to placate things. And as she comes riding her donkey, verse 20, as she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her. And she met them. So you have to imagine 400 men, all armed and dangerous and seething and hungry, descending in one side, and this little lady on a donkey with some fig cakes coming down the other side. This doesn't seem like a fair fight. It's kind of, maybe some of you are old enough to remember the guy standing in Tiananmen Square against the tank, standing there by himself, just alone, right there. And this is Abigail facing these 400 men, trying to stop the wrath that's coming, that's approaching. So she intercedes here. She puts herself between David and her family, her extended family, and Nabal's family. So she comes riding her donkey down into the ravine, 400 guys coming down the other side. And David is nursing his wounds. This is an ugly expression I like, but it's nursing the wrong that's been done to him. He had just said to himself, it's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness, so that nothing of his went missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, and here we figure out what he has in mind. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him. David is offended, and he's going to do something about it. He's going to go in and take the life of every male in Nabal's family, his servants. He's just going to wipe them out. He's basically going to just wipe out the entire little village that Nabal has here. We kind of knew that David had bad intentions, but he expresses it, and he's just been harboring this bitterness and this anger. And Abigail had already sent the food ahead, it says. So even the food didn't apparently placate David. Okay, the things had probably already got there, but he was still nursing and harboring his bitterness and was going to do something very, very bad to Nabal and his family. So, jumping on to verse 23, when Abigail saw David, she quickly got down off her donkey and bowed before David with her face to the ground. Now, Abigail just intercedes in such a magnificent way here. Just follow what she does, how she comes in and she appeals to David's heart. She appeals to his better man. She comes in, she gets off of her donkey, bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. Let's just set aside Nabal. He doesn't exist for a second. Just look at me, David. Just look me in the eyes, David. Just let me talk to you for a second. Just hear me out. She says, please pay no attention to Nabal. As far as for your servant, as for me, your servant, I didn't see the men you sent. I never saw anybody come. And now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and since you live, the Lord has kept you from bloodshed. Recognize here, we see it's Lord, capital L-O-R-D. Abigail invokes the covenant name of God, Yahweh. The faithful covenant name of God that he has chosen, that he is the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He's the covenant God. She invokes his name over and over and over to appeal to David's heart. Said, David, you are not the kind of guy to head up and just start shedding blood over an insult. She says, as you know, my Lord, and as surely as the Lord your God lives, Yahweh is your Lord, David. You're not your own Lord. Yahweh is your Lord. And since he has already kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming you be like Nabal. And we'll see what happens to Nabal in a little bit. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the men who follow you. Please, David, accept this. Forgive the offense, and here, take this. You haven't done anything wrong to this point, David. You haven't shed a drop of blood. Your intentions, I know them. I can feel them. You're here with 400 armed men, but take these things and overlook the offense. She says, please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God, again, Yahweh, your Lord, will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord. David, God is going to establish you as the king of Israel. God is going to establish you but what kind of king will you be? What kind of king will you be? The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, David. You don't go off killing unarmed shepherds and their families. No wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. You're not that kind of guy, David. You're not that kind of king. She goes on, even though someone is pursuing you to take your life. She's talking about Saul there. Saul has tried to kill you several times. He's tried to take your life. You didn't take revenge on Saul. David, it's not right for you to take revenge here. Your life will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. Your life, David, is hidden. It's not subject to some offense by some foolish shepherd. You're not that kind of guy who'd be so low, so petty, so petulant as to start murdering people over an offense. Are you, David? That's not the kind of person. You're the king of Israel. You're God's man. You're called by the Lord. You were the one that when all your brothers were passed over, God said, no, that's the one. Anoint him. He's the one. So she reminds him that your life is bound up. God's got your life held fast. You don't have to protect your own name. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as a stone from a pocket in a sling. Now, where do you remember a pocket and a sling from? What story? Goliath, right? Goliath. She's so clever. She's so intelligent and wise. She knows the story of Goliath. She's like, David, remember when you were a little kid? Remember when you were a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, and you were facing this giant out there whose spear was like a weaver's shaft, who could have just taken your life, but you trusted in God, and God delivered you, right? You didn't have confidence in your sling and your rock. Remember that, David. She calls this beautiful metaphor. Your life is bound up by God. He's going to hurl them away. David, you are not the kind of person to go out and exact revenge in your own name. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. David, you don't want to do this. Listen to me, David. Look, you don't want to do this. She plays this beautiful prophetic role in his life, challenges him. David, don't be a fool like my husband. Don't return evil for evil, David. And when the Lord your God has brought you success, remember me. Remember your servant. She says, David, you don't want to do this. She reminds him. So how will David respond? Here's this little lady standing here between him and his sworn vengeance. He's even called a curse on his head if he doesn't do it. She's armed with nothing but some raisin cakes, some fig cakes, and some flour. Okay, this is not a fair fight, but she reminds David of who he is. He's not just some vagabond out in the woods. He's not just, extracting protection money from some shepherd. David's beautiful greeting to Nabal was blown away in a second as soon as he's offended. But he's not like some worldly king. God is going to establish his kingdom. She reminds him, David, this is who you are. That God, and David has said, we've referenced the Psalms this morning. We read through Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, as we sang. The Lord is my shepherd. David penned those words. No one can be against me. God is my shepherd. David wrote things like, you, O Lord, are a shield around me. I cry out to you and am saved. He wrote that in Psalm 3. He wrote, some trust in chariots, some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God in Psalm 20. He said, have mercy on me, God. Have mercy on me, for in you I take refuge. I take refuge in the shadow of your wings in Psalm 57. David, this is who you are. You're the Lord's man. God is your shepherd. You don't have to defend yourself. So how does David respond? David says to Abigail, praise be to the Lord. Again, Yahweh, all caps, praise be to Yahweh, the God of Israel, who has sent you today. Abigail, you didn't come on your own initiative. I know your servant stirred you up, but it was God who sent you to meet me today. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come to meet me quickly, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive at daybreak. David turns, he listens to her. Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought and said, go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. David, one of his defining characteristics is he does turn when he's confronted. As we talked about this morning, he's a conflicted guy. He has so many things in him. There's evil and good all mixed together like all of us. But when David was confronted with truth, he repented. He turned his heart. He turns here. So David hears her words, and he says, Abigail, you're right. I was about to do something very, very foolish. I was about to take matters into my own hands. I should let justice to God. Let him do what he is going to do on my behalf. So David says, he has heard her words, but he acknowledges that it's not just her words. She has been sent by God himself to speak. So when Abigail went back to Nabal, she heads back home, wipes her brow. That was a close call. Heads back. He was in the house holding a big banquet like that of a king. Now, it's ironic, right? David is the king. He's out there, nothing to eat, nothing to drink. Nabal won't give him anything, but Nabal, who's like, I can't spare anything for you guys, is feasting like a king. And apparently, he is in very high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing at all till daybreak. Abigail just decides, okay, we'll just let him enjoy himself tonight, and then we'll tell him what almost happened. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him about all the things that had just transpired, tells him the story of David and 400 men and lots of spears and lots of swords, and his heart failed him, and then he became like a stone. And about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. Now, I'm not saying if there's someone messing with you and you just they're going to be stricken dead or anything like that. Don't get the wrong impression. David is king. This is a unique time in redemptive history and all that. But David could have taken matters into his own hands, could have been like a mob boss and gone and wiped him out and scared everybody in all of Israel. He chooses not to. He chooses to say, okay, God will look out for me. I trust that God will look out for me. Everybody, all of Nabal's neighbors, now when they look at things, they're not going to say, okay, if we cross David, he might just come in and kill us all. They say, if we cross David, we're on the wrong side of God himself. That's a far more compelling place to be. So David doesn't do a thing. The Lord strikes Nabal, and he dies. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing on his own head. David acknowledges that what I was about to do was wrong. I was about to go and exact justice, or what I consider justice, revenge, and that would have been the wrong thing to do. He has kept me from doing wrong. Through Abigail, through the beautiful intervention of this beautiful and wise woman, through her prophetic voice to David confronting him. Then David sent word to Abigail, and here we do get our happily ever after bit, right? Then David sent word to Abigail asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, hey, David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground, said, I am your servant. I am ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants, an expression of yes, I will come with you. Abigail quickly got on this same old donkey, and off she went, attended by 5 female servants, and went with David's messengers and became his wife. The end. And ties it up nicely, right? No, so Abigail is just just such a beautiful picture to me of how God can work and speak. And it's just this story, it's funny because it's one that I've loved. And, I mentioned that we have a daughter named Abigail, so I've been drawn to it over the years. But many folks haven't really interacted with it much. But I wanted to draw some conclusions. I said there's some big theological things that we could draw from here about how God works and how God is going to make David king, but also some very, very personal things that we can apply to our own lives. And the first thing there were a bunch of conclusions and applications that fell out to me, but the first one is that actions speak louder than words, and reactions speak louder than either. David's words didn't reveal David's heart, right? Hey, Nabal, good day to you. Good health, good prosperity to you and your family. Blessings on everything you own. Sounded really nice, right? His greeting to Nabal was just nice as could be, sweet as pie. An insult turned that from, okay, I will kill you and everybody in your family. Now, that's what was really in his heart, right? This may be a silly example, but so did you ever buy your kids anything and then they wouldn't share it with you? Okay, so my kids love like $100 milkshakes from Chick-fil-A, and I do too, but I'm too doggone cheap to buy them for myself. So when I get them one, I just want to drink, I just want some. I'm like, can I have some? And one of my kids in particular is like, and now they're older, they're 22 and up. But when they were kids, and I'm like, okay, my tight-fisted self is going to pry my wallet out of my pocket and pay for that $100 milkshake. They're not $100, and they're really good, but they're expensive. I'm like, so I've said, yes, sweetheart, I will get you a milkshake. Got them the milkshake, handed them the milkshake. But my craven little heart, when they won't give me some, comes out something more like, well, I'll just take the whole doggone thing then, I'll show you. It's more like David's. Okay, I'm not killing anybody, obviously, but it does reveal my heart. And there are times whenever we say one thing, and our actions, though they speak louder in words, our reactions, they speak louder still. What we're going on, you ever fighting someone for overpaying for a meal and you hope they win, kind of thing, like, oh, no, I got it, but you're hoping they win, in this and that they pay for it. That our reaction, what we feel inside of ourselves, is much more revealing of what's going on in our hearts. And that's where God wants to deal. God takes this opportunity to reveal David's heart. David, you look like, yes, you spared Saul's life. You'll spare Saul's life again when these kingly things, the big things are here. You're a good guy. Okay, you make the right choice. Here, in this very specific thing, when you're offended, when your feelings are hurt, you're ready to wipe out an entire village of people over an offense. Do you think that's right, David? Do you think that's the person I want you to be? Do you think that's the man I'm calling you to be as king of Israel? It is absolutely not. And in your life, there may be things that just engender a reaction that you're like, wow, that just was nuts. Why did I overreact like that? Let God point the things out in your heart that are going on, that are deeper, that reveal something more than just what words can speak. Secondly, wisdom and folly are calling to you at every turn. The voice of wisdom, the voice of folly are calling to you at every turn in life. Are you open to a courageous voice of wisdom in your life? In the book of Proverbs, wisdom is incarnated, is envisioned, embodied as a woman, calling out, please, to the fool, turn aside, don't do this, don't do that, do this, come to me, this beautiful woman who's calling out saying, come over here. And the voice of folly, on the other hand, is also embodied as a woman who calls out. But if you notice here, the voice of folly would have been much, much louder to David. So I'm sure his 600 men were all deeply offended, and not a single one of them seems to raise their voice. They strap on their sword and they head off. They're all hungry. They're all angry. They had encouraged David to take the life of the king. How much more would they encourage David to take the life and the sheep and all the possessions of some offensive shepherd? The voice of folly can be so loud in your head. But the voice of wisdom can just be this small, gentle whisper. It can be quiet, just the voice of little Abigail there on her donkey with her her raisin cakes and stuff, appealing to David. But she was the voice of wisdom. She was the voice of wisdom that David slowed down enough to hear, quieted his heart enough to hear. Sometimes in your life there will be there's a cacophony of noise. It's just, do this, do this, do this. But I encourage you, I don't know what that is, but are you intent on getting or even practicing wisdom, or you're not just looking for any negative data? I don't even want to hear what anyone else has to say. I already got my mind made up. David he's just nursing his wounds and he's going somewhere. God graciously sends little Abigail to intervene and stop him. And this prophetic, wonderful voice from Abigail, in the most unlikely of sources, she stops him cold in his tracks. He turns around and it saves David and changes the trajectory of his kingdom. So in your own life, listen for the voice of wisdom. Listen for the voice of wisdom. It might be still, might be quiet, but if there's a verse or a friend that, like, everybody else is saying, yes, 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 do this, there's one person saying, I just don't know. Maybe not. Maybe listen to that voice. Listen for that voice of wisdom. And here another is, a gentle word turns aside wrath. That's from Proverbs 15:1. Are you maybe being that voice of boldness and wisdom in someone's life? Are you speaking boldly, gently, and wisely into others' lives? There are places in your life, there are people in your life who are bent on destruction. They are bent on doing something that's probably wrong. It might not be nearly so cataclysmic as this, but making choices, and you have the opportunity, sometimes God is prompting you to say something to them. Or maybe your own conscience is, if you're not a follower of Jesus, maybe you're not chalking it up to God or whatever, but you know that you ought to say something to them. You have a responsibility to say something. Say something. Be bold, speak boldly, speak gently, but speak wisely. Take the opportunity to say something. You may spare someone a world of hurt just by speaking up like Abigail did. Now, Abigail was obviously very, very motivated to stop David, and she did. But you have friends, acquaintances, people in your life that you need to speak to. Next one there. So another thing that we can learn, and this is specifically for those of you who are followers of Jesus. This is where the rubber meets the road for a follower of Christ in my mind. Only God's grace enables us to truly return evil with good. Whenever someone acts evilly towards us, they offend us, they hurt us, they do something mean and malicious, to return that with good, that is a Christian thing that points to a transformed heart. Abigail, when she comes to David, she points over and over to the work of the Lord in David's behalf. The Lord has worked on your behalf. David, you are in covenant relationship with God, and it's not right for you to take matters into your own hands. You are in covenant relationship. He's the one who's established you as king. He's the one who will set up your kingdom. It's not your job to do it, David. Well, for us, how much greater? Those of us who are followers of Jesus, whose very Lord himself has suffered wrong on our behalf, who laid down his life, who bore the sin of the world, who died on a cross and rose again. How much more should we bear wrong and return evil with good? The passage here, Matthew 5, Jesus says, you have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Now, love your neighbor, that's from the Old Testament. Hate your enemy was not. But you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends the rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So you're a child of God. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you're a child of God, and you've been called to live differently. It's not just a suggestion, it's a command. Jesus says, sorry about that. He says that you are to pray for those who persecute you. You're to love your enemies. As followers of Christ, when we are wronged, we're not to return evil for evil. We return evil with good. We are to respond in forgiveness. That doesn't mean we never seek justice for ourselves or for those around us. There are some circumstances where that's completely appropriate. But in this, you are not seeking revenge. You're not seeking to even the scales up. You're not seeking to get even with people. We leave that. As followers of Jesus, we're the people who have chosen to say, hey, a God who could create the entire universe, hold it together by the power of his word, who would lay his life down for me, and then say, you are to love in the same kind of way, and I'll give you the strength to do it. That's who we are as followers of Christ. So those are some of the big things we can learn from this passage that David hopefully could take away. What can we learn? One, our actions speak louder than our words, but our reactions speak louder still. Wisdom and folly, like, two things on your shoulder sitting there calling out to you, but they're not equal. They're not one little devil over here, one little angel over here. The voice of folly can be much, much louder, but listen for the voice of wisdom. A gentle word turns aside wrath. God has opportunities for you to speak truth into places to stop people from the path of destruction, take them when they're offered, and by God's grace, He will enable you, and not just enable, He commands us to truly return evil with good. So if there's situations in your life right now you're thinking about, boy, I should get back at that person, they deserve this, that, and the other. That may well be the case that they deserve it. I entreat you, and Jesus commands you, leave room for the Lord's anger. Leave room for the Lord's justice in their life. And His justice is not just to punish, but is to redeem. So let me close in prayer. Father in heaven, I thank you for the Lord Jesus, that we as those of us who follow Him have His Spirit inside of us and can return the evils that are done for us with good. Thank you for this wise voice of our sister Abigail, who spoke truth gently, wisely into David's life, who helped to establish a kingdom that was not one that was based on bloodshed and carnage, but one that was based on mercy and justice. In Christ's name, amen.